The world needs forests more than ever. As we tackle issues from population growth to the climate crisis, a healthy and resilient forest ecosystem is key to achieving a truly sustainable society. Now, at the IUFRO World Congress in Stockholm, Sweden, stakeholders from across the forest sector are coming together to work towards just that, and we'll cover it all on IUFRO World Congress TV. It's such an exciting time for the forestry community with a multitude of challenges to face and the 2030 sustainable goals just 6 years away. So it's essential that we bring together the policymakers and research scientists from all over the world, and this is one of the best places to do it. Join us right here on IUFRO World Congress TV to discover the latest science and innovations and how it will impact the world in the decades to come. We'll be covering all the World Congress's themes, and today our focus is Forests for Sustainable Societies.
Cities are expanding really fast in the global south, and they can't live well without trees and forests and the services they provide.
Today, join us as we sit down with Harini Najendra to look at urban forestry in the global south.
We are changing the way that we are approaching working with communities, and it's becoming less about extracting information and working with communities to co-create solutions.
And speak to Rob Kozak and Tetra Yanuariad about how we can scale up collaboration between forest science and business.
I hope that we are contributing for the transformation of the sector. And this transformation means impact in the forest, in society, and of course in our country.
And travel the world with us as we take a look at some of the biggest projects and some of the most promising research in our daily film series. And where can you watch it all? You'll find us on screens throughout the venue, on the IUFRO World Congress website, and you'll find all our content online and on YouTube and X. First up though, we wanted to make sure you're well primed for each of our daily themes. Every day, the scientific committees Elena Pauletti and organising committees Fredrik Ingmarsson would be bringing us up to speed. Over to them.
The theme Forest for Sustainable Societies deals on how social changes in demographics, innovation, consumer and producer patterns interact with environmental changes in climate and land use to generate new market and governance models. We are very much devoted to foster a just transition to a decarbonized and nature-based society, which is a prerequisite for human well-being, for quality of life, with consideration, of course, of individuals and communities, gender, and social equality.
This is the biggest Congress ever for IUFRO, and it's really mirroring the general development within society to really support cross-sectoral collaborations. We see a trend where natural sciences and social sciences do collaborate to a higher degree than before. And this is what the attendants will see when they join the IUFRO World Congress program.
As cities in the global south expand rapidly, it's essential to design those cities to ensure human well-being and resilience to climate change. To discuss this and the role of urban forestry, I'm delighted now to be joined by keynote speaker Harini Najendra. Harini, thank you ever so much indeed for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's kick off. We're talking about urban forestry. How do you define urban forestry as opposed to any other type of forestry?
It's forests in cities to begin with, but it's also forests that really serve people's needs much more than other kinds of needs, because in cities the only trees you find typically are planted by people and to serve the needs of people.
Why is urban forestry so important in the global south?
Two reasons. One is that cities are expanding really fast in the global south. So we're going to go from a world from 50% urban to 80% urban in the next 20 years, and that's all global south. And the second is there's so many people in the global south, and they can't live well without trees and forests and the services they provide.
So how important are forests in those urban communities to the people who live there?
Extraordinarily important, all kinds of reasons. You have climate change, so you have heat waves and pollution. You need trees to clean up the air. But you have livelihoods. People still depend on trees for livelihoods in the heart of the city in the global south, all the way to spiritual and sacred needs, because people worship trees and find them sacred, and that's a really important, meaningful need of people in the south.
How's your work developed?
I'm an ecologist who studied forests for about 15 years, but in 2006, I started looking at cities in the global south, specifically India, because no one was looking at these cities from a forestry perspective. Foresters study rural areas, and urban people don't study forests. So, it fell through the cracks. I thought it was important, and I started looking at it.
So are all urban environments the same when it comes to talking about urban forests?
No, there's a lot of context dependency, because the way people relate to trees and forests is a very, like I said, spiritual, sacred, context dependent. And what we've really seen is the needs of people in the global north are very different from the global south. But also Africa, Latin America, Asia, they all have their own needs.
Well, tell us a little bit about that divergence of needs in Africa, Asia, and other countries in the global south.
So, for instance, in Asia and Africa, you would have a lot of animist religions and spiritual religions. There's a lot of spiritual relationships with trees, which are often completely left out of planning. In Latin America, you might have other needs like commons and communities, and these are gathering centers for people to work and to organize, and there's an entire social capital angle of that, which is, again, often left out of policy.
So you talk about the differences. When it comes to, and you talked about policy, so when it comes to formulating policy, how can we formulate policy whilst taking into account those differences?
Especially in the global south, what you find is administrators and policymakers are in a rush to develop the cities, and what they mean by development is infrastructure development and economic growth. And what they fail to understand is unless you have urban forests, you're not going to have well-being, and you can't have people living in cities with, without clean air, without shade, without, just a sense of well-being that urban forests provide. So that's what we need. We need them to understand that when you say infrastructure, urban forests are as much part of infrastructure as roads and highways and electricity.
A point well made, Harini. So thanks ever so much indeed for joining us. It's really interesting, great to meet you, so thank you.
Thank you, it's been a pleasure.
Really important work being done there in the global south. Now, for the first of our features from around the world, let's head to Australia, where researchers at Western Sydney University are working to migrate the impacts of climate change through sustainable nature-based solutions.
The Hawkesbury Institute for the Environment is our flagship research institute at Western Sydney University. The institute has 3 research themes: soil biology and genomics, plants, animals and interactions, and ecosystem function and integration.
UFRO is an experiment in the forest where we're increasing the atmospheric CO2 concentration around the trees so that it mimics what the atmosphere will look like in future.
We can use these studies to define the climatic tolerance differences among tree species, help inform tree breeding programs, and also to model forest productivity in a higher CO2 world.
What we're doing at the moment is modifying this model with the data that we have from our experiments and use that information to make projections for what the future might hold.
We have species which are highly vulnerable to changing climate regimes that occur only in forests. And so we need to really think about novel conservation strategies and ways that we're going to protect species in forests.
Microbes below ground discuss or have communication much like we are now. If we can interpret and know how to manipulate that conversation, we can increase or maintain biodiversity even under future climates.
This can help governments to select the species that we need to plant, especially for creating sustainable, livable, and resilient cities.
As we discuss climate change, it's important to remember that not everywhere in the world is impacted in the same way. And though we have extensive data on the topic, there's work to be done on the way it causes forest decline and tree mortality in different areas. We spoke to two experts who are working to expand that knowledge base.
Large-scale international cooperation is important, or initiatives are important, because you have to assess the forest at the scale where it is important, and forests don't have frontiers. So, forests are large scale, so we have to go large scale. Our understanding of the effects of climate change, unfortunately, is not very good. This is because climate change is a word, but actually it is a process. Basically, the forest is changing by the time we're speaking here as the climate is changing. And so our understanding is always sort of lagging behind.
Forests rose to the top of the climate agenda through their mitigation potential, so how they store and sequester carbon. But what's been less recognized is these other mitigation benefits that forests provide that have nothing to do with carbon. And there's been some really interesting research that's showing how forests, by the way that they move water and by their biophysical characteristics and processes, can actually provide 20 to 40% bonus mitigation that has nothing to do with carbon, simply by providing these cooling benefits. And of course, those cooling benefits and rainfall regulation also have a huge impact on adaptation and resilience, especially for local communities, local producers on the ground. We know that forests are already under major stress from climate change. So it's absolutely essential to promote an integrated approach to management of climate-induced risks to forests.
To improve the whole initiative and to get a better understanding, we need data. The most pressing is that we get together, that people collaborate at the international level, even at the global level, because climate change is a global phenomenon. So if we do want to get a grip of what's happening out there, we have to get together. And by doing this, then we learn about what's happening out there, and then we can define strategies how to improve our understanding.
It's absolutely fundamental to ensure that forests and trees are reflected in the next round of NDCs. Those are the nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement that include both mitigation and adaptation action, as well as in national adaptation planning and national biodiversity strategies and plans.
The United States Forest Service has a research branch that's organized into 5 different geographic centers. The Southern Research Station covers the 13 states in the southeastern corner of the country. We study a wide range of forest-related issues, from social science-related issues and economics to invasive species, forest diseases and insect outbreaks, to the fire side, particularly in the area of prescribed fire. The southeastern United States has a leadership role in prescribed fire. And so we can provide and share some of our technologies and leadership with the rest of the country to try to help advance prescribed fire, so that hopefully they can learn at a faster rate than we did to get to where we were. Hopefully we can accelerate the process for them.
In developing and maintaining forests for sustainable societies, it's essential that the private sector is brought in alongside the research community. To look at how we can scale up the exchange between forest science and business, I'm delighted now to be joined by UBC's Dean of Forestry, Rob Kozak, and ITTO Projects Manager, Tetra Januariadi. Well, first of all, thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you for inviting.
Why is the exchange between science and business so important achieving sustainable development goals?
Achieving sustainable development goals is a grand challenge, a wicked problem, and we just all need to be pulling in the same direction and working together on these big sort of challenges together. And I would say that the goals of business and scientific organizations are slightly different. The businesses are leaving, I think, an indelible mark on our landscapes, our natural landscapes, and need to be a big part of the solution as well in terms of the interventions that they can provide to addressing sustainable development goals. And academia, scientific organizations can be a big part of trying to understand what those pathways and processes are.
Well, let's pick up on that point. I mean, what are some of the challenges that businesses face that scientists can help with?
For instance, that the business sector need innovations, creativities to put the situation profitable to them, and that can be helped by the scientists. And then in the other way around, the scientists need support from the business sector to continue their works. Like, for instance, supporting the financial supports, also for broadening the network of the scientists.
So Rob, it seems to me like that's both sides can win with that. The scientists can help, and business can help with funding with the science. So how well, in your experience, do both those groups communicate?
Well, it's okay, but there's room for improvement, obviously. The first sort of piece of that is that there's very real organizational and cultural differences between, let's say, a scientific organization and industry. Industry tends to be sort of short-term, market-driven, where academics tend to be more meandering and, thoughtful in their approach. And that's just the beginning of the differences. And I think the way around that is to form and create these entrenched long-term collaborations built on trust and mutual respect, and go from there.
So how do we scale this up, this exchange?
We engage business sector across the stakeholders. So we provide a platform for communication between the business sector and the scientists there. So to scale up, I think we need to intensify effort from the international organization like IUFRO. Doing this kind of World Congress is a good arena for meeting the needs from both sides, business and science. And also, I think in terms of the project, like we are based on the project intervention on the ground. So we need more support from donors countries and international community to put them together, all the stakeholders.
And one of the points you just made about projects, about specific projects, how important are some of the bigger projects for doing this?
Yeah, I mean, they're incredibly important, especially to the communities that are impacted. And we need to work hard to co-create knowledge with those communities and co-create research questions and methodologies, and do so in a respectful way that allows us to work with mutual respect with those communities, and not to extract information necessarily. But it requires a whole new way of thinking around decolonization, especially with indigenous communities, and exploring new epistemologies and research interventions and so forth. So it's a paradigm shift.
So my final question is about those communities, and you're saying it's really important that both sides, business and scientists, work closely with the communities most affected. How confident are you? You call it a paradigm shift. How confident are you we'll see this paradigm shift?
We're seeing it. I mean, we are changing the way that we are approaching working with communities, and it's becoming less about extracting information and working with communities to co-create solutions. The impacts that industry is having is on communities, and the solutions reside within those communities, and we're working with them to figure out paths forward.
Are you confident?
Very confident, because we are working with the community for almost 40 years, and then we help them, and they also help us to really make clear the real problem on the ground. So with that, I think we will targeting the project objective and also intervention in the right way.
Well, thank you both so much indeed for joining us, and I hope everything goes well for you this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We believe that for companies, individuals, and organizations, everybody will be stronger if we join efforts. If we have more competences, wider views, we surely will be able to have better solutions, whatever problems that we are facing.
Our research focus is actual needs of the industries and the public entities and the private owners. That is the big challenge we have. All this innovation actually gets into practice.
It's extremely important that we are able to pass those ideas, the outcomes and the solutions to others.
I hope that we are contributing for the transformation of the sector. And this transformation means impact in the forest, in society, and of course in our country and in Europe.
With attendees coming together from all over the world, we wanted to head into the crowds to get a real sense of the biggest issues facing the forest sector today. So, it's over to you.
Deforestation is the biggest problem because we cannot lose any more forests. As a person from the tropics, I think fighting against the deforestation is the most important challenge for us researchers.
Well, I think climate change poses a threat to human survival, and there is a need to address it. And the involvement of communities in climate using nature-based solutions is very important.
At this point of time, what we see is that there's an increasing demand for food security, whereby we rely on forest resources as well. Where there has to be a balance between creating agricultural land as well as preserving and conserving natural resources such as forestry.
We have to balance the production or the old production of timber, for example, to balance with the role of environment played by the forest.
In my thinking, it's forest pests and diseases. These are biotic factors that would either cause a species wipeout, they will be causing symptoms that would compromise the quality of our forest, so they affect forest health in general.
Here we are just researchers talking together, but the biggest challenge is to take this out of our group, let's say.
I think IUFRO presents opportunity for us to meet and engage, especially to exchange ideas.
To stay here together. It's the most important word, the key word of today.
That's it from our first show from right here at the IUFRO World Congress in Stockholm. We've heard how forests are key for sustainable societies, but what's next? Tomorrow we'll get into the science as we investigate our next theme: strengthening forest resilience and adaptation to stress. And how can you watch it, you ask? You'll find us on screens throughout the venue, on the IUFRO World Congress website, and you'll find all our content online and on YouTube and X. Make sure you watch it any way you can. So until tomorrow, it's goodbye.